Hi, everybody, from the worldwide headquarters of the CC and JT Amateur Hour. It's JT Hume again, here reading another chapter of Duties Faithfully Executed. What it is I'm doing this video thing, this vlog thing, so people can hear what the writer has to say about their book as it's created. Yeah, I know it's pretty exciting stuff, but I feel like it's closing the circle, so to speak, on this book. Reading this book and then explaining what I did right and what I did wrong. So let me dive into this here in a second. First of all, I just remind you folks that Duties Faithfully Executed is out on Kindle for a very low price. Please do that. And the link to all that will be down here in the explanation, as it always is. And I want to point out that this week, depending on when you saw this video, there is another not a free book, excuse me, another new book that CC Cassidy Carson and I wrote together. We sort of had fun doing that. So go ahead and dive into that book too. The links are all down here. Please do that. And as always, give us some feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and start picking up where I left off. I'm going to pick up where I left off. There's other videos here, on my page. Dive into them in sequence, pick and choose, whatever you're comfortable with. And as always, feedback. If I say it 3 times, it's sort of like, a ghost will appear and make you give me feedback. Okay, I'm going to dive into the next part of this book, and the heading on this one is Interlude Finance Manager. As you may remember, Bruce is a political candidate. He's a politician, and so what he's doing is he's going through his autobiography, and along the way, he's making stops explaining about people who are part of his campaign. And so this next interlude is the finance manager, and so let me start reading. Brother, can you spare a dime? Or your maximum allowable campaign donation under federal law at the very least. When I'm done writing this book, I'm going to find a safe little university and teach political science. I'll gladly carry a full academic load and happily guide eager future politicians around the minefields of a campaign. I'll point out the difference between a local and national platform, how to kiss the right kinds of ass, and freely show them the physical and mental toll the process takes on good people. I'll be armed with a whiteboard and a marker. No computers and no books. Mine will be a lecture class with a pass-fail depending on the quality of participation, but nobody will fail. My students will love me like Congress never did. My favorite class will be campaign economics. My run for the presidency may have been a major Charlie Foxtrot, military parlance beginning with cluster, in most instances, but we could raise money like it was going out of style. It was simply mind-boggling how much cash rolled in. And there was no mystery why, but let me back up. My first exposure to the industry of electing people was when I registered to run as a state senator. Within a week, I got pounds of snail mail on producing campaign flyers and signs. Not just 1 or 2 letters, but dozens of packages. My house got calls from consultants ready to share their experiences at a small cost. I thought newspaper advertising would be relatively cheap, but I soon learned that political ads cost much more than regular ads. As my ambitions grew, so did the costs. Depending on the political office, you must have multiple campaign offices and the staff to man each of them. Telephones at all locations are critical, and this includes landlines and cells. Computers and secure wireless routers are expensive, but well worth the peace of mind. Then there's the transportation. You can use your own car, depending on the campaign, but a bus or a plane is almost inevitable when going statewide or national. There's the unbelievable cost of signage for lawns, businesses, and billboards. Direct mailing and cold calls require hard copy and electronic access to national voting rolls, and again, not cheap. Television and radio ads are a whole different science, depending on the market and demographic. Town and cities within 100 miles of each could have 10 TV stations and 50 radio stations, and each will charge you an arm and leg to advertise during the light of day. They will gladly record a 15-second spot, but the quality is dependent on the amount of money that you spend. If you go with a national firm, you better show cash on the barrel or have a healthy kidney to donate. There are 1,000 other expenses, and a campaign can disappear under the weight of debt faster than you can believe. The political nickel and diming is endless because everyone expects a handout of some sort in exchange for their support. The harsh reality is you pay those debts every single time, because the center truth of American politics is no matter the party or cause, no one takes your campaign seriously if you don't raise and spend millions of dollars, and no one respects you unless those millions of dollars are someone else's money. I had plenty of family money to spend by then, but more than one person said doing so would drive a stake into the heart of my campaign. Check with Ross Perot or Steve Forbes if you have doubts. Many politicians have trouble raising money. I've heard horror stories of the rubber chicken circuit and the things that people had to kiss, literally, to get a check. They weren't blessed with Marnie Hayes, my finance director since day one. Mozart was a virtuoso of musical composition, Shakespeare a maestro of the lyrical written word, Eisenhower an organizational genius. All of these greats were novices compared to Marnie, a distinguished Columbia Business School graduate and my first intern, so to speak. She could charm a room full of grandparents out of Social Security checks for the sake of their descendants. Millionaire and billionaire CEOs refusing to cough up the cash found their arms twisted in a friendly way, but not so hard that they couldn't write a check, which they always did. Marty controlled a dozen PACs through intermediaries that touched every important issue of the day. I tried not to think too deeply on the legality of the last trip because it literally bought me the governor's mansion on my first try. Even on our worst days, people kept throwing money at us. The memory boggles my mind to this day. Was it the message? Was it the innate American trait to equate participation with donation? I'm not stupid. The support was all about Marnie and what she represented, which I'll explain down the road. I do know that I was grateful for every dime and for Marnie's passionate dedication to ensure every penny was spent. Every penny spent was done so in a way to maximize its effectiveness. Her reputation began to spread, and her prowess in fundraising became so well that television stations were giving us a break on cost. Simply put, a station manager cooperated with us, or he watched our money go someplace else. Like you've seen here, there's a lot of places to spend money when you're running for office. You know Marnie by another name, and I'll get to her soon. Next chapter, The Hill. A few years ago, I made the mistake of sounding like an expert on a certain mountain range in Southwest Asia. I did this in mixed company and felt secure in my knowledge because it seemed I'd walked up and down those hills dozens of times. Parts of my flesh and blood were left on one of those damn mountains. Funny thing about geologists, they're everywhere. Of the thousands of professional scientists around the world, there's one career field that seems to have the most time on their hands. Every crowd has 3 or 4 geologists who are either bored or looking for a job. And they have no fear of speaking out and revealing yours or my ignorance about the rocks we stand on. That may explain why a lot of them are looking for work. When I left Colorado Springs with a Bachelor of Science and certification as a jump master, I ended up in Afghanistan as a special tactics officer. There's a gap there of about a year or two. Out of respect to the good men and women who work hard to preserve our freedom, I won't give you specifics on the training, ballbuster, living conditions, ghetto style, cuisine, your dog eats better, or my teammates. The best part of the instruction was the body of work to get us all in shape for all sorts of conditions. No slouch when we started. Being a member of the Air Force's Wings of Blue specialized parachute team, and thanks to 4 years of hard gym work, there wasn't much fat on me. Special ops training burned off the rest. The added advantage was that the work consumed my entire consciousness, and the dark clouds stayed far away. The first hint of distant thunder came when I got the inevitable orders to the hill. Among many blue suiters, Afghanistan is called the desert because it is one of the most arid and hostile environments in the world. When Americans think desert, they tend to picture Lawrence of Arabia and vast expanses of sand dunes. Afghanistan has some of that, and you do have to prepare for long trips without easy access to water. For me, though, Afghanistan will always be the hill because there's so many damn mountains. As I write this, we still have a presence in the hill, though nowhere near the peak of our involvement in the first part of the 21st century. We poured thousands of young men and women in hopes of fighting those 9/11 bastards and bringing peace to a region that had been devastated by the Taliban. Did we succeed? Depends on what time of day you ask that question. Read a history book sometime and you'll see the odds were stacked against us before George Bush the Younger gave the go order. Here's a short list of invaders of the region of Afghanistan: the Persians, Alexander the Great, the Islamic conquest, Genghis Khan, the Timurid Empire, the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and Operation Enduring Freedom. Looking at this list, it's safe to say the Islamic conquest left the longest lasting impression on the Afghan natives, and the jury is still out on the United States. We've done wonderful things for the Afghans since we went boots down in their country, but there were many horrific mistakes. My conscience is clear for the most part because I preach every moment I could that everyone should be treated with respect. Sometimes people listened, and many times they didn't. Either way, I can close my eyes and still see the children with their 1,000-yard stares. Our mission orders were simple: find the bad guys. We didn't know that Osama bin Laden and his friends had found refuge in Pakistan. We guessed, though. But it didn't negate the need to spread out and secure the region. That meant searching and shutting down the caves. Whatever vision of cave popped into your brain just now was probably wrong. Cave dwelling in the hill is a science and a culture that started in ancient history as a means to water the fields and the farms that fed the Afghan natives. They found the mountains relatively easy to dig up, and so began centuries of molding and shaping thousands of trenches, roads, and caves. When the Soviets invaded in the 1980s, cave building became a miracle of modern engineering. When the Soviets invaded in the 1980s, cave building became a miracle of modern military engineering. Humongous underground compounds were excavated for the rebel militia along with their supplies and ammunition. When the Taliban retreated to the mountains in front of the Allied invasion during George Bush the Younger's administration, they weren't exactly suffering from deprivation, not immediately anyway. You may think they had all the advantages, and it's true they had a lot, but not as many as you might think. The strategic problem with cave dwelling is that it's a defensive and immobile strategy. You can't pack up a cave with a ton of supplies and easily move everything 50 miles out of harm's way without being seen. You can't hide a cave indefinitely either. No matter how the depth, somebody will tell you what we wanted to know if we paid enough of the right kind of silver. Additionally, we either had or developed the technology to ferret them out. When the cave dwellers thought they were under attack, they'd booby-trap the entrances like the Vietnamese did in the 1960s. The simplest solution was to throw a grenade down the hole and wait for the towel heads to emerge from the earth through another exit. But again, as a defensive response to an offensive situation, caves became less popular for the enemy as time went by. That's one reason why Predator drones evolved into the weapon of choice for the Allies. The bad guys were run out of their caves and on the run. Before those coffin makers were fully implemented, we had to use good men and women to go deep into Indian territory to flush out the enemy. We did our best to cover each other's back, and most times we guessed right and prepared adequately for the worst. Sometimes we royally screwed the pooch, and people died or got hurt bad. People like me. Okay, I'm going to pause there before we go on to the next section, and you can see what the big mistake was that I wrote when I was writing those sections of the books is the timeliness. I wrote this book back in 2012, 2013, 20 time frame, when we still had a strong military presence in Afghanistan. And as I read this, 10 years later, the public face of the American military has left Afghanistan. Do I suppose that we have a secret or clandestine presence in Afghanistan? Well, I'm sure that's true, as we do in many countries where they are, as you may know, our friends. But if I had correctly predicted then what I know now, would I have written the books with, where it pretty much said out loud that years later, decades later, we would still have a strong presence in Afghanistan? Yeah, that was probably not a good case of forecasting on my part, and I probably should have anticipated that better. And I will say that in future books, I try to do a little bit better that way. I also realized that I've dropped a couple names on there that they're going to make people run for Google, Ross Perot and Steve Forbes, which were more common names 10 years ago. But even then, they were going a little out of style. So I was having a little problem there when I was writing this book, uh, being a little more neutral on timely references. So it's something that I need to think about. As for the previous section on that, or as for the section on the campaign financing, that one holds up pretty well. I did what I think I did was a fairly good job of blending the more robust 21st century procedures, culture of financing a campaign. Because right about then, when I was writing this in 2012, 2013, we were making that big shift to social media. We were making that big shift to the web, to web pages and more of electronics versus the old school of newspaper and television, which I alluded to in this book. So I did okay there. The problem is that section will not hold up pretty much as strongly as it will years from now, but you do the best you can with what you got. I need to do, when I write books in the future, I need to do a little bit better forecasting. But the details that you heard me read, and hopefully you read for yourself, the details about the campaigns, campaign materials, getting gobs of mail, getting gobs of contacts from consultants and mailers and so on, is actually very true. I was a campaign manager for CC's campaign when she ran for a statewide office many years ago, and you do get absolutely inundated by folks wanting your money to help your campaign. So that section of the book held up pretty well. So I'm okay with that. So all in all, so far so good. Still lots of book to read. I hope that you're finding this interesting. I'll try to do these posts a little bit more regularly. Until then, there are more videos that you could be watching. They're on the video page at www.carsonhume.com. Also on that website is the link to our books, the link to our podcasts, the link to our blogs, all sorts of goodies out there. If you're interested in learning more about Cassidy Carson and J.T. Hume, please feel free to dive in. Please feel free to get to know us better, and please feel free to reach out if you have questions. I hope you find these videos educational. I'm enjoying them. Yeah, I do sometimes get a blah, blah, blah kind of thing going with my tongue, and it's as embarrassing for me probably as it's uncomfortable for you. But hopefully with a little bit more practice, I'll be able to power through just a little bit better. Until the next time, y'all take care of yourself. Thanks in advance. Love you lots. Take care. Bye-bye.